This is lecture 8, the second part, which is chapter 23, and we're going to be discussing microbial disease of the digestive system. Please review the structures of the digestive system and the two groups. Here are your major structures. The accessory digestive organs. A detailed structure of the teeth. And as you can see, these are the areas where the bacteria will develop biofilms. Tell me why. Okay, as you already know, we do have a normal microbiota in the digestive system. The esophagus, stomach, and duodenum. These are actually almost free of microbes, and this is due to peristalsis. And as you know, that is a function of the esophagus. And the rapid transport of food helps prevent these colonizations of microbes. In the actual tongue, teeth, jejunum, ileum, colon, rectum, you do have streptococci. And also sometimes this can actually develop into endocarditis. Do you remember what that is? You have the lower small intestine and colon, and you definitely have a lot of microbiota here, and they actually act as antagonists of invaders. And also you have the mucous membranes in the intestine, which actually prevent the entry of microbes into your bloodstream. If you look at this graph, these are the regions: the duodenum, jejunum, ileum, and colon. And of course, in the colon area is where we have the highest amount of coliforms. And as you remember, coliforms are the ones that are identified as lactose positive. Tell me why. So dental cavities, gingivitis, and periodontal disease. Your caries, also known as your caries, appears as holes or pits in your teeth. Now, when you talk about periodontal disease, that's when you actually get into your gum disease. Okay, your pathogens are your Streptococcus mutans. These are the ones that mostly causes the cavities, and they allow the biofilm formation of your teeth. Also, you have the Porphyrophorus gingivalis, which causes periodontal disease, and that's because they have this enzyme known protease, which break down your proteins in your gingival tissue. And this is the process of tooth decay. As you can see, here's where this biofilm. And I don't know if you remember, but your shirt, your biofilms is when you congregate different bacterial colonies and they interact with one another to produce channels of nutrition. Okay, so most adults have experienced dental cavities. However, there's some people that haven't, and that's due to genetics, believe it or not. Uh, Cavities are known to be because of sugar. Get away from the sugar. Okay, the candies and all that. How do you know you have a cavity? Well, it's by visual inspection, of course, with X-rays. Um, you can actually treat it with a filling. However, sometimes we have other issues, which would be gingivitis. Again, that's the disease in the gum, or gums disease, and you actually have to treat it with antibiotics right on site. And how do you prevent it? Brush the teeth. Okay, now we're going to move on. And here we're looking at pectic ulcers. And the little good looking guy that you see here, that's your Helicobacter pylori. Um, it has a flagella, so therefore it can move around very easily through your stomach lining. It also contains those protein adhesins, which facilitates to attach to the surface of your gastric cells. And it has ureases. These are enzymes that help neutralize the stomach acid. And you can see here. Since urease produces ammonia, neutralizes your stomach acid. And eventually, as your Helicobacter breaks down your cells, your gastric cells that is, it makes pouches in which your gastric juices can go and form then your ulcer. How do you get it? Well, it's through fecal oral transmission. Okay. Also, your stress. Once you have the Helicobacter, it increases the ability to reproduce because of your stress levels. It reduces your immune system, and it's treated with antimicrobial drugs that actually inhibit stomach acid. And of course, how can it be prevented is through your fecal oral transmission. Gastroenteritis, it's like the word says, itis, remember, is anything that means inflammation. Okay, so he would look into the stomach or the intestine inflammations. How do you get this? Contaminated food or water, and also by, unfortunately, poor living conditions. You have other manifestations that can be caused due to different causative agents. And manifestation means how the actual patient expresses symptoms like nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, abdominal pain, and cramps. Dysentery means you have intestinal inflammation, and this is when you have diarrhea containing mucus and blood. This table gives you the different types of disease and the actual pathogens that cause it. Okay, let's keep going into the bacterial disease. Shigellosis, okay, Shigella, it's a gram-negative bacteria. He causes it, and he actually causes it by releasing enterotoxins. Enterotoxins, that means there are actually toxins that are released inside the cells. Your pathogens actually they affect the small and large intestines. And how is it diagnosed? Well, the symptoms, and they look into the stool of the patient to see if Shigella is present. And yes, they support treatment and antimicrobial drugs. And here's the events of shigellosis. As you can see, he attaches to the surface because he has adhesins. And then it goes into the cell, multiplies inside the cell, and after it will leak out into the bloodstream. However, it is phagocytized and destroyed by your white blood cells. Okay, I actually do not know anybody who has not suffered from this actual bacterial gastroenteritis known as your traveler's diarrhea. Well, why is it called like that? Usually when you travel to other areas, you get diarrhea because your body is not accustomed to the water, for example. And most of the time, it is caused by E. coli. How do you treat it? Well, electrolyte replacement, Pedialyte, Gatorade, etc., etc. Now, you probably know about this bacteria too, Campylobacter diarrhea. It is an amphitrichus. That means it has two flagellas, one on each side, as you can see here. Main source, where do you get it from? Poor cooking skills, chicken. Especially when you go to those barbecues and you see people cooking the chicken and it's not well done. Or, again, if you're treating the same cooking chicken with the one that is raw with using the same utensils, there you go. That's how you probably get it. And that's what we mean how you get it. How you prevent it is proper hygiene, and of course, raw poultry has to be handled carefully. Okay, so this is your Clostridium difficile. Okay, why is it called like that? Well, it's actually hard to kill. Okay, it causes inflammation and pseudomembrane formation. That means colitis. That is what causes very, very strong stomachal pains. And here is again the inside of the intestine. How do you think they got this picture from? Laparoscopy. Okay, it is actually diagnosed by looking at the bacterial toxin in the stool of the patient. And how do you avoid it? Well, sometimes it's hard, but they also mention that it's best if the patient can fight it off with his immune system, because if we use too much of these antimicrobial drugs, your immune system just becomes less and less. However, the use of antimicrobial drugs in this case can actually trigger the disease to be even more and more dangerous. Okay, salmonella and typhoid fever. Well, we have salmonella enterica, and this actually can cause also the typhoid fever, and at the same time it can also cause diarrhea. Okay, you have typhoid fever, which is how you get it? Well, again, contaminated food or water, and there's salmonellosis, which is another case, is actually from bad eggs or contaminated eggs, and the mechanism is pretty much the same as you already seen in other pathogens. And finally, they move into the bloodstream and they get to spread out. How do you diagnose? They look at the patient's stool again. However, salmonellosis is self-limiting. That means it will only grow up to a certain point or replicate to a certain point. So there's no treatment for it. In the case of typhoid fever, you use antimicrobial drugs. And proper hygiene, it's a must. Vibrio cholera. Well, this one causes cholera. You heard about cholera. This pathogen is found in water, and it could be fresh and salt water. Okay. We actually have had many spreads of cholera in the recent decades, and basically the production of cholera toxin is what causes the epidemiology. And again, these pandemics have occurred throughout history. Here's the action of cholera, as you can see. Once it goes into the actual cell, the intestinal cell that is, it releases the toxin, and that triggers your cells to secrete chlorine and sodium and other electrolytes to replace this. And what happens is your intestinal cell will release too much water, and that's when you get this horrendous diarrhea, which they call the rice water stool. Okay, how is the diagnosis? Again, they look at the stool and they call it rice water because it looks like mucus, like it looks like rice, but it's actually mucus. Doxycycline is a treatment given to the patients. However, you do have vaccines that are available, but they're only short-lived. Proper hygiene again. Food poisoning, yes, this is the one that I was telling you about. Make sure that you don't cross-contaminate your fresh food with the cooked food. And that is why they said this is an outbreak associated with social functions. And just like any other diarrhea, how is it treated? Fluid and electrolyte replacement. Tell me why. Okay, so now we're going to move with the viruses. And we start with herpes. Oral herpes is caused by herpes 1. And these actual infections are in the oral cavity, but it can move into gingival stomatitis, pharyngitis, and even esophagitis. Okay? The is the lesion that you usually know. By the way, this is very common. About 80% of the population has herpes 1. And children get it at a very early age. Of course, as you know, children tend to share cups, and that's where you actually mostly time get it. Okay, how do you know you have it? Well, just by looking at it, right? It's the lesions. And how do you actually treat it? Well, you have creams that can actually help. How do you avoid it? Well, no contact, no herpes. Mumps. This is the mump virus. We are the only natural host, humans, and it causes salivary glands to be swollen. It was once when they be the children used to mostly get it once upon a time, but now we have immunization, so it's no longer a factor. Stomach virus. This is the virus stomach virus, right? This is the one that we are familiar with and usually lasts about 24 hours. Okay? Uh, there's different viruses that can cause it, but most of the time it's the rotavirus. Okay? So when you get the gastroenteritis virus, how do you know? Well, you know it's a virus because you did do a serological test. And again, water, electrolyte replacement is the treatment. And how do you avoid it? Well, filter water and sewage and good hygiene practices, and there's a vaccine for it. Hepatitis. Well, hepatitis affects, of course, the liver. Okay, and the signs is jaundice, fatigue, abdominal pain, weight loss. However, you might get the symptoms years after you get the virus because the virus can go into a latent stage. There's different types of pathogens. There's hepatitis A all the way through B, C, and the Delta virus and the E virus. These are your comparisons of the hepatitis viruses. Okay, so how do you know if you have it? Well, the first thing that you have is the symptoms, as already mentioned, and they can do a serological test to identify the actual antigen with the antibody of the virus. And the alpha interferon is the actual treatment given to people with hepatitis. It is not a cure, but it actually helps the patient not to get cirrhosis in the long run. Vaccines for type A and B, but not for C, D, or E. Tell me why. Giardiasis. Okay, now we're moving on to the protozoan disease. Um, Here we have a giardiasis. It is asymptomatic, meaning that most of the time you don't even know you have it. Okay, you could get diarrhea and other symptoms even for like 4 weeks, which is crazy. You can definitely become dehydrated and die. And these are resistant to chlorine, heat, drying, and stomach acid, so they're very hard to kill. And how you get it? Well, water, drinking water. Okay, and it occurs mostly in these developing countries because they have poor water hygiene. Uh, Also in other areas, and where people do hiking and camping and swimming, and they don't actually filter the water, that could be a major cause also. You actually get a microscopic observation of Giardia, you can see it. Okay, you can get it a sample from the stool. You can treat it for adults and children with metronidazole or flurazolidone. And again, good hygiene and filtering the water is the prevention. Another protozoan disease is the cryptosporidiosis. Okay, diarrhea again. It is caused by Cryptosporidium parvum, and it is unclear of the actual pathogenicity that it has. It results again contaminated drinking water. How do you diagnose? You could actually find oocysts in the feces of the patient, and you can treat it with fluid and electrolyte replacement. Again, prevented with hygiene. And these are the oocysts that you can see even under your light microscope. Very dangerous amoebiasis. It is asymptomatic, and again, it can give you diarrhea, colitis, and even appendicitis. It, caused by entamoeba. You could actually find these virulent strains because they produce uh, toxins that actually hurt cells and facilitate invasion. When you look at a sample, you can find the trophocytes, and you can even find this in a blood sample. Same thing, contaminated water, contaminated hands, and actually even oral intercourse. That's how it can be transmitted. The human carriers are the ones that help to transmit this. It is diagnosed by, again, a microscope. You can find entamoeba in the stool or even in the intestinal biopsy. How is it prevented? Safe sex, proper hygiene, and also when you have individuals in the endemic area, you should drink bottled water. And of course, make sure everything is very well cooked. Tell me why. Now we're moving on to the helminthics. Okay, the helminthic infestation on the intestinal tract. These are macroscopic. That means you don't even need a microscope. You can see if these are worms, right? And you probably are familiar with most of these or heard about this. For example, your tapeworm. Okay, it is the most common of the sextodes actually, and is asymptomatic. However, if you have the symptoms or signs, you definitely, one of the biggest indication is right here, weight loss. Okay, these guys literally suck on the food that you eat. They just like eat it up. Okay, pathogens are your Taenias saginata, also known as your beef tapeworm, and then you also know about the solium, which is your pork tapeworm. And how does it work? Well, the life cycle is right here. Okay, and as you can see, if you have a pork tapeworm, is because you did not cook it thoroughly, and then it can grow into your own intestinal tract. Okay, how do you get this high incidence? Inadequate sewage treatment, and also when humans live in close contact with livestock. How do you know? How is the diagnosis if you have it? Well, fecal sample, okay. You find the protoglids, which are the mini worms, if you want to consider it that way. It is treated with nitrosamide or praziquantel. And how do you prevent it? Make it well done. And this can grow very, very long in the intestines of the subject. Pinworms are another nematodes. Okay, they're long, very long also, cylindrical at the same time. How do you know if you have it? Well, it starts with perianal itching, irritability, and your appetite gets decreased. Although 1/3 of the cases don't even know they have it. It is caused by Interrubus vermicularis, The females, what do? They deposit the eggs in the perianal region at night, and then they dislodge and spread the disease throughout the intestine. This is actually the most common parasitic worm in the US. And of course, the diagnosis is based on the identification of the eggs from the perianal region, or actually from the adult pinworm itself. Personal hygiene all the way. And these are right here, the eggs. However, in letter A, as you can see, that is the actual worm. Continue with the helminthics. This is Anisakiasis. He actually it is actually done by several parasitic nematodes. Okay, Anisakiasis. How do you know if you have it? Again, sometimes it will be asymptomatic. If you do have symptoms, same abdominal pain, nausea, you have vomiting and fever, and sometimes some individual might even have an allergic rash. And yep, as you can see, Anisakiasis is basically carried in the host of fish. So for the people that like sushi, be careful. Okay. Diagnosis is done by endoscopy to actually see the worms. And the treatment is like literally by removing the worms from the intestine. Tell me why. And that concludes the second part of lecture 8, the second out of 3.